Hey guys, this is Jan for Chess24. In this video we're gonna take a brief tour through yet another exciting playoff battle played by the Chinese prodigy Wei Yi. This one is against none other than Chess24's own Peter Svidler, played in the quarterfinals of the FIDE World Cup. Here we have pictures by the protagonist. The regular games were tied 1-1. Svidler was very upset at himself because he missed quite a few chances in the second tournament game with black. So the players hit the tie breaks, where in the first stage 2 25 minutes plus 10 seconds per move games are played. And Peter Svidler changed his tune with white, went for d4, where Wei Yi likes to employ Svidler's own favorite opening, the Grunfeld defense. As we just saw in the picture, there we had Svidler reading his Grunfeld book. And also, you guys will probably know that Svidler did a series of excellent Grunfeld videos for Chess24. So by all means, check that out. And facing his own opening with white here, he went for one of the main lines, knight f3, bishop g7, queen b3, takes, castles e4. And here he was surprised by the move bishop e6 played by Wei Yi. The main lines are knight to a6 or pawn to a6. But bishop e6 is a very rare move. White as a choice, d5 looks principled, but then the bishop retreats to c8. And it's not so clear this advances helped white or it created a target for the black pieces or the black pawns to attack. So instead, Svidler retreated his queen, went queen to d3, and he was hit by another typical Grunfeld move, the fake pawn sacrifice c5. If white were to take this, then after knight bd7, black would sooner or later regain his pawn, be in good shape. So instead, Svidler went d5, bishop to g4, and another typical idea, knight to g5, not allowing this exchange of the bishop on f3 after h6, h3, bishop c8 is more or less forced. hg5, hg4 is just not a very good idea. So bishop c8, knight f3, and e6, once again targeting the d5 pawn. Svidler took a lot of time for all these moves, so he was clearly surprised by the move bishop to e6. And he decided to go for an endgame that is more or less equal, but events would still develop. Not really an endgame actually, because the queens were kept on the board for now. But Svidler forces the exchange with queen to d6. One part of Peter Svidler's match strategy against the very tactically gifted Wei Yi was to allow the exchange of queens whenever it made sense, because he had figured that in the endgame the Chinese prodigy might be a little weaker. Here after c4, I'm not sure about c4 by the way, I think black could have played a move like rook fc8 intending bishop f8 and would be in good shape. But after c4, Svidler decided to spice it up, sacrifice an exchange, rook e6, fe6, bishop c4, gaining a good structure and a pawn for his sacrifice exchange. The position is roughly equal, but it might be a little easier to play with white. Knight can jump into c7 or d6. So Wei Yi did defend pretty precisely, but a couple moves later things really spiced up here after knight takes a7, playing to win the exchange back, and Wei Yi had already planned to give it back with knight takes e3, knight takes c8, and knight takes g2. Now this looks good for black because knight f4 is a threat, but Svidler had prepared a nice little trick, knight e7 check, king f7, knight takes g6, covering the f4 square. And after king takes g6, we see the point, rook g1. This knight is pinned and gets picked up. And white emerges with slightly the better position after rook a2, rook g2, king f7. However, Wei Yi went on to defend very precisely. And after some back and forth, well, mainly fourth, white decided to go in for an ending with knight takes e6, rook takes e6, and e5. Arguably, f4 was a little better. Still keeping his pawns a bit more flexible, but after e5, knight d7, f4, b5 takes. White has a rook and these dangerous passed pawns, but black has a passed pawn of his own, and the option to return a piece should really be needed, and therefore a couple moves later these two pawns were exchanged for the black knight, but this position turns out to be a draw, and Wei Yi went on to defend it quite comfortably. So a draw in the first game. Here we get the end. This bishop is very powerful, controlling his own pawn and stopping the white pawn from queening. So there's nothing better than just giving the rook for the pawn and accepting a draw. Draw in the first game, that brought us to the second game where Svidler was playing with the black pieces, and they repeated the opening they played in the tournament game, the Italian, the Giuco Piano, and Svidler did not follow his own play with castles, fearing an improvement. Instead played a6, another typical setup intending bishop a7, and he got a very good position out of the opening. This is normal, knight bd2, h6, and here Wei Yi thought for a while and went for the move queen to e2. More common are moves like knight f1, playing knight g3, or just castle followed by rook e1 and then knight f1. Queen e2 is a clever move because it's hoping for black to castle, and after black has played h6, white could now launch an attack with g4, which is quite dangerous because there's always the hook g5 breaking open the black king's position. But Svidler knows the subtleties of this Giuco Piano kind of stuff. Played the precise move bishop e6 before castling, offering the exchange of bishops. Here what white normally does is keep the bishops on the board and play this very quiet position with bishop c2. But Wei Yi hurried to inflict his opponent with double pawns with bishop takes e6, f takes e, which is sometimes a good idea, but in this structure it strikes me as making black's life pretty easy. And that's how it went. A couple moves later, Svidler already had the more comfortable position. The bishops were exchanged, these knights were exchanged, and we see all black pieces operate quite harmoniously. The rooks can double on the f-file, put pressure on the f3 knight, and this knight can regroup to e7 and g6 to create an attack on the king. That's what happened. Once again, Svidler won, this time Svidler won the opening battle once again with the black pieces and got pressure out of the quiet Italian. And Wei Yi has to be extremely careful here. Rook takes f3 is already a threat. The knight has to retreat, and we see that white's opening strategy has failed. Knight g6, g3, queen g5. Another nice move, making use of the fact that you can't exchange here because of the intermediate check. Rook takes f2 and black wins. Therefore Wei Yi had to go into defense, h5, h4. Here after h4 he probably should have gone g4, which is an ugly move to make, giving up this f4 square, but at least keeping the g-file close. Instead he went rook d3, takes, and queen to h4, and here the black position looks very, very threatening with his knight about to jump into f4. But so far the tendency in this match is clear that Peter Svidler was more experienced in the openings and in the strategic battle, but when it comes to direct hand-to-hand combat, there is hardly anyone stronger than Wei Yi. And once again, in this position, he manages to fence off all the direct threats. After one mistake by Peter Svidler, rook 8 f7, should have gone rook d8, which caused a lot of problems for white. Preparing to enter here with the rook, for example, rook takes e5, rook to d2 with the threat of knight d3, and white is in serious trouble. But after one small mistake, rook f7, he took his chance, went rook to d1, queen to h6, queen g4, activating his pieces to the maximum, and the position is no longer clear. The game developed more or less logically. Svidler went on to miss one more chance. This is, by the way, a 25-minute game. This is the second 25-minute game, so there's still some thinking time for the players, but the players were running very low on time here. King h1 was an inaccuracy by Wei Yi. Should have gone for knight h3, getting rid of this knight. But after king to h1, black once again had a powerful plan, targeting this h4 pawn, which now is not so easily defended with the king anymore. And Svidler managed to create some pressure, but to make the long story short, Wei Yi managed to bail out with knight e2. Here was probably the last chance for Peter Svidler to play for a win by just keeping the status quo, going king b8, defending against queen a7 ideas. When, well, black is better. It's not so easy for white to hold this. But instead, Svidler decided to win a pawn on h4, but the queen endgame does not offer a lot of winning chances. And a couple moves later, once again, Peter Svidler offered a draw here. He's still a pawn up, but white has counterplay because of queen b4 check, and the queen side is very vulnerable. For example, b6, c5 does not promise black any hopes for a win. Therefore, 2 draws in the regular game, and yes, Svidler must have been a bit unhappy about this one because he had such an overwhelming position. Out of the opening, this position he got is just a dream scenario for any player on the black side of the Giuco Piano. But the score was 1-1, and the time control got even less. Now the players are playing 10 minutes plus 10 seconds. In general, one would think that the shorter the time control and the longer the match goes, the better for Wei Yi, the 16-year-old. probably in better shape than, I don't know how old Svidler is, 38 or something. And one would expect him to get tired, but he went on to dominate the opening of the next game yet again. They repeated the line we saw in the first rapid game, e4, bishop e6. Svidler had prepared a new idea, queen to b5 instead of queen to d3. If I say prepared, I'm not quite sure how he did it, if he checked his notes during the break or if he just thought about it. Our next game, I'll try this one. Threatening this pawn, Wei Yi reacts correctly with bishop d7, intending queen b7, bishop c6 to win this pawn back. And now the queen retreats to b3, slightly more convenient square than d3. c5, once again, this typical break. And d5, once again, ignoring it. And here white has a slightly better version of that. And in this position, Wei Yi uncharacteristically did not go for the sharpest move, the move b5, which he should have played, after which the position can become very sharp. It's based on a little trick. Bishop takes b5, knight takes e4, and if knight takes e4, queen a5 check, regaining the piece with a good position, or well, let's say with an equal position. And yeah, who knows what Svidler would have done there, but Wei Yi did him a favor, offered the exchange of queens, which, as I mentioned, was part of Svidler's match strategy anyway. It's also not a good move because black does not manage to generate any initiative to compensate for the white center. So Svidler went on to build a very powerful position. A couple of moves down the stretch. Knight bd7, knight d2. Avoiding this exchange, maybe Wei Yi should have done that one move ago, and now threatening to hunt down the bishop on g4, which doesn't have anywhere to go. So knight e5 has to be played, h3, and the bishop has to get back home. Bishop to e2, and this is once again a dream scenario out of the opening for Peter Svidler. He controls the center, he can push the black piece around with f4, gain more space with e5, and he did win the opening battle big time. e6, queen takes b6, I'm not sure this was necessary. f4 immediately, followed by d takes e. Looks very powerful for white as well. But can't really fault this move because it gives white a great position. Knight d7, d, e, f, e, bishop c4, targeting this pawn. Knight b8, good move, defending it, and planning to reactivate this knight. Castles, knight c6, e5, knight e8. This is an overwhelming endgame for white, who has the choice between many tempting options. Bishop b5, intending to jump to c4 and attack the b6 pawn, looked very promising. Another very natural move seems to be knight d e4, just centralizing this knight, taking control over the d6 square, the g5 square, and white just has a dream position. But here Svidler maybe wanted to play too precisely or make a little prophylactic move. Played the move a3, giving his bishop a retreat square on a2. But now we once again see the big strength of Wei Yi, that if there's any chance for counterplay, he will seize it, and so he does here. It goes g5, trying to break up the white pawn formation in the center. And surprisingly, Svidler went along with this. I was expecting him to play g3. He probably disliked the fact that after gf, gf, this knight can redirect to the f5 square, and maybe there's bishop h6, targeting his f4 pawn as well. So he didn't go for this, but instead went fg5, which allows black to liberate his pieces. Knight takes e5, bishop e2, knight to d6. All of a sudden the position is no longer clear. This negative trend for Svidler would continue over a couple moves. g4, bishop d7, knight e4, all very logical. Knight f6 check, king h8. Bishop d2, intending to go here. So far so good. But Wei Yi stayed on top of things, went knight g6, planning to block this bishop by going e5. With a roughly equal position, Svidler should have gone knight h5 here to be able to capture this bishop when it's needed, and capitalizing on the fact that black cannot go knight to f4 because of rook takes f4. Check it for yourself. This wins material. ef, bishop g7, or rook f4, knight g7, intending to go bishop takes e5 check after recapture. So he should have played that, but instead his sense of danger let him down. He went king to h2, probably planning to go king g3 and then h4. But once again, Wei Yi strikes at the chance of counterplay, goes h6, undermining this knight on f6. And now all of a sudden, white has to defend. He went knight h5, accepting to sacrifice this pawn. hg, bishop d3, hoping to win it back. If this knight went, let's say, to e7, white would be better after knight g7, followed by bishop takes e5 check. By Wei Yi, tactically, you can't fool this kid. He's just so sharp. Went knight to h4. The point is after knight g7. Now you don't recapture, but there's a little intermediate check, knight f3, defending this pawn on e5. And if rook f3, then rook takes f3. And white is not in time to defend everything because after bishop e5, rook d3, there's no good discovered check with the knight and black is just winning. So things had gone wrong for Svidler. He had to play king g3 instead, king g7. He's now pawn down. This knight can jump into d4. And it did look bad for him. Bishop f5, knight d4, rook e1, rook e8. However, there is still some hope. White has the two bishops, and if black ever captures on f5, it leads to opposite color bishops, which are known for their drawing tendencies. And therefore, yeah, all hope was not lost. Rook fe1. I'm not sure if this was a blunder or a sacrifice. It allows rook takes f5, netting black another pawn. Gf, knight f5, king g4, knight e3 check, rook e3. And black is 2 pawns up, but there is opposite color bishops, so it's not straightforward yet. King f6, rook back to e1, bishop d7, king g3, bishop f5. Looks like very good winning chances for black. But Svidler did what you can do. He tried to simplify the position, exchange his weak pawn on h3 by going h4. Takes, king h4. And here Wei Yi makes a mistake, goes bishop to d3. Stronger move would have been bishop to d7, for example, controlling the g4 square. Goes bishop to d3, allows king to g4. All of a sudden, white has a threat of rook takes e5, followed by king to f4. And there's not very much black can do about this. So what he did play is bishop f5 check, king f3, still threatening rook takes e5. Bishop d7, allowing it, he couldn't really stop it, rook e5. And the game is a draw because after rook takes e5, white goes king f4, followed by bishop e5 with a dead draw. So after 3 rapid games, the score is tied 1.5, 1.5. Both sides, or I think Svidler was probably not very happy with himself, had blown 2 very good positions, while Wei Yi, yeah, just proves again he has at least 7 lives. We've seen this before from him in the tiebreaks against Yuri Vov and then against Ding Liren. He would get into trouble, but then use his resourcefulness to get out of there. However, what might have given Svidler some hope is that here he blew his position big time, but then managed to hold on from a difficult position, or to put it differently, Wei Yi managed to blow his advantage in this game as well. That brings us to the next game, to the second very fast rapid game, if we can call it that, with 10 minutes each. And Wei Yi was sick of getting bad positions after 1 e4, tried his luck with 1 b3. Even 1 b3, the theory nowadays, and the players follow what is considered to be the best setup for black. There's knight c6, knight f6, and then bishop d6. Looks artificial, but defends the pawn, and black just wants to go castles, rook e8, then go bishop f8 and d5 with a good position. So that's pretty much what happens in the game. Knight e2, castles, rook e8, knight g3, a6. Asking this bishop where he wants to go. Wei Yi wants to keep it. Bishop e2, bishop f8, c4, d5, takes. And we get a Sicilian with colors reversed where black should be doing alright, but so is white. At least he's managed to avoid getting outplayed in yet another slow Italian game. And after knight c3, bishop e6, rook to c1, Svidler goes for a strange move. I've talked to him briefly. He said this move is not so bad, the move knight db4, but I believe, yeah, there were more natural ways to play. Knight takes c3 or queen d7 with an equal position. Knight db4 is aimed at the d3 square, but after d3, white just threatens to kick this knight out with a3, winning some tempi. Here, what Svidler should have done is play the move a5, intending to make sense of this knight db4, a3, knight back to a6, which looks weird, but the knight covers the c5 square, which is very important in the structure, from a6 and stops white from going knight e4, knight c5. So this position does seem pretty playable for black. And instead Svidler went queen to d7, and now after a3 his knight had to return to the center, and he just lost 2 tempi, provoking white to go d3 and a3, which are useful moves. Knight ce4, now planning the invasion on the c5 square. Black is in a bit of trouble, and he adds to his list of worries by going a5, directed against b4, but overlooking, or so I believe, the move knight g5, after which his bishop on e6 gets captured, and that's sort of a key piece for black in the structure, so here he is clearly worse. Knight to b6, taking the bishop, of course, takes, bishop to g4, where Yi keeps playing well, queen to d6, with a stable advantage because of this extra bishop, which can target the black queen side, and yeah, it's just not a very pleasant position. Queen c2, knight to d5. The knight returns to d5, showing things have gone wrong. Rook fd1, rook e d8, bishop f3. You could make a case for different moves along the way here, but so far all of this is very logical. g6, not a move you really love to play, but you need to cover the f5 square and create a square for your bishop on g7, so it's the smallest evil. And here Wei Yi does something very logical, but it might not have been best. He goes knight e4, queen e6, and knight c5, grabbing the clean 2 bishop against 2 knights, but that gives black a chance to sort of organize his forces at least. Instead, queen to c4, for example, looked very unpleasant, planning to go queen to b5 and knight e4 only at an opportune moment, with very tough defense for black in store. After knight e4, queen e6, knight c5, bishop c5, queen c5, white is still seriously better, but at least black can sort of defend everything for now, and Svidler starts getting a second breath of life, goes rook a6, tending to go rook b6 if needed, and defending against queen b5. And all of a sudden it's not so easy for white to make progress. Wei Yi went back, queen c4, rook b6, and g3. And after g3, Svidler found a very strong move, which is not obvious, at least not to me. The move knight d e7 back. Looks like it's ruining his pawn structure for no good reason. And this time it's not only because of his desire to reach endgames against Wei Yi, but has a very concrete idea. After queen e6, f e6, this pawn on b3 can't really be defended without concessions. For example, after rook c3, black would go knight d5 and force the exchange of this bishop while getting his pawn structure fixed. And in this position, black would already be fine. So probably instead of taking on e6, Wei Yi should have played something else, maybe rook c3 immediately. But this move was too tempting, and instead of rook c3, he decided to give up a pawn and hope on the power of his 2 bishops after b4. Takes, knight d5. Once again, white could more or less bail out by going bishop takes d5, e takes d, bishop c3, still keeping his pawn with a roughly equal position, but Wei Yi wants more than that, goes bishop c3 immediately, and Svidler plays rook d7, just defending his c7 pawn and preparing to go knight takes c3, followed by knight takes b4. Now white has to do something to just not just lose the pawn. He tries d4, and black could have simplified the game here by playing knight takes c3, rook takes c3, and something like e takes d, which would most likely lead to a drawn rook ending in some line like this. But Peter Svidler, to his credit, decides he wants more than that. He's back in the game, and he decides to continue the battle with the pawn up against the powerful 2 white bishops. Bishop c5, rook a4, bishop e2. For now, white has enough compensation. But arguably, with very little time, it's easier to play with the knights. There's always some sneaky knight jumps, knight forks in the air, while what the bishops are up to is easier to anticipate, and it's harder to blunder an unexpected attack by a bishop. Here, for example, bishop b5 was threatened, so Svidler covers it with rook a5. And a couple of moves later, the game has developed normally. Black has these 2 passed pawns, but white still has enough compensation. And Wei Yi decides to add fuel to the fire by going f5, creating a square for his bishop on g5, but also risking maybe losing another pawn. E takes f, and Svidler decides not to gamble with rook takes f5, which would run into bishop g4, or rook e5, which is a better move, but still makes things insanely complicated after bishop g5 check, and just plays knight to f7, covering this g5 square. Bishop f4, knight e5, rook c1, c6, bishop e3, b5. He has managed to keep all his pawns on the board, and these pawns have advanced a little. White still has compensation with his active bishops, but the trend is clearly in black's favor after the bad opening. And so would continue. For now, Wei Yi maneuvers confidently, but he is a pawn down and he has not managed to generate that much counterplay. Knight to g5, another tricky knight jump here, planning to go knight to e4. And bishop b3 check, knight c4. Turns out that black is doing quite well with his knights, and white has not really managed to coordinate his pieces all that much. Situation is still not too bad. King g2, rook a8. This rook wants to return into the game and take up a more active position than the one on a5. And here probably Wei Yi missed a chance to create some counterplay by going bishop c2, targeting the g6 pawn, when things are still kind of unclear. That's not a move you really consider because it allows rook a2. However, after rook a2, rook f2, white would still be very much in the game and alright. Instead he went bishop to b4, logical enough, but now after knight to e4, c5 is threatened, and you can see these knights are very far advanced. Wei Yi realized that something had gone wrong and tried to force a draw by pinning this knight, but here Svidler understands that he is better and that he can play for a win. Goes king to d4, rook d1, king to e3, and white cannot force a draw with rook e1, because after king d3, rook d1, black has knight cd2, which, yeah, covers everything. His king is very safe on d3, and now these pawns are free to advance when the white situation is already pretty desperate. Said rook c1 was tried, but that does not help white's cause at all. Once again, because black has a very strong c5. And all of a sudden, Svidler is winning. c5, bishop e1 looks logical, but then this knight regroups via e5 to d3. And look how well the black army coordinates with these passed pawns. It's just nothing white can do. And the rest was more or less agony. Rook e1 check, king d4, rook d1, king e5. The king wisely returns because now, yeah, he has managed to gain a tempo attacking this bishop. Bishop e1 is impossible because of knight e3 check. So last chance is bishop c4, bc4. But these passed pawns together with black's great coordination will get the job done. Bishop e1, rook a3, another strong move, supporting c3, playing rook d3 and cutting the king off from the f3 square. And that's it. King f1, rook a2, once again cutting the king off. And there is nothing that can be done about the march of this pawn. Rook c1, king d4, rook d1, king e3, rook c1, king d3, rook d1. And once again, knight d2 check is the clincher. Bishop takes d2, rook takes d2, king e1. Here black could win with rook takes d1 and then bring his king over to the king side. But it's much easier to just go c3. And there is absolutely no defense for white. Let's say he goes h4. Black has many ways to win. For example, king to e3. Let's say g4. Rook h2. Planning a check on h1. And it's game over. So Wei Yi did resign after c3, which means that our friend Peter Svidler made it to the semifinals of the FIDE World Cup. Congratulations to Peter Svidler. And congratulations and thanks to Wei Yi for all this entertainment. He has given us some great chess, but on this occasion, Peter Svidler did prevail and he's facing Anish Giri in the semifinals. Let's see if we got a pic of those guys as well. Here we got them. Anish Giri, who's looked very strong throughout the tournament, is going to be another very serious test for Peter Svidler. We'll root for him, of course, and see how it goes. Thank you guys for watching this very brief summary. I'm on my way to the airport, so I'm really in a hurry. And see you next time. Bye-bye.